August 14th, Maximilian Kolbe.
When oppression forces a fearless man to change course, he accepts it as his next assignment. One day in 1939, Poland was suddenly crowded with Germans, quartered in all the larger houses. Armed SS soldiers and blue police hunted Jews. They were taken from their houses, barns, cellars, attics, and other hiding places. Sometimes, hand grenades were thrown into the cellars. Jews were beaten and kicked, and it made no difference whether they were men, women, or small children. By mid-afternoon, the Nazis had assembled more than 900 Jews and posted a notice: "All Jews will be shot." Polish people were forced to begin digging graves in the Jewish cemetery. The penalty for helping the Jewish people was death. This was from an eyewitness report from a prominent Polish physician who recorded what happened in the public arena. But in a less public part of life, one humbled monk named Maximilian Kolbe committed his life to overcoming the growing evil with love. Before sunrise, despite his fragile health from a lifelong illness, he rose early in the morning to offer a warm breakfast to a mother in peril, a coat to an elderly Jewish man who had run for his life from the Nazis, a blanket to a child who was suddenly an orphan. The once silent monastery which Kolbe had been entrusted with was now filled with sounds of gratitude and hope, and this right in the middle of unprecedented suffering. Kolbe worked tirelessly to hide, feed, and clothe 3,000 refugees, of which 2,000 were Jews. One bleak winter evening in 1941, the infamous Gestapo pounded on the monastery door. They had one agenda: to bring Maximilian Kolbe to justice. Kolbe assured his friends, "Courage, my sons. Don't you see we are leaving on a mission? They pay our fare in the bargain. What a piece of good luck. The thing to do now is to pray well in order to win as many souls as possible." The Gestapo ripped the door from its hinges, exploded into the monastery, and shouted angry commands in German. "Seize these men and show them their fate," shouted the Nazi commander. Without another word, Kolbe gave himself up and offered a confident smile of hope to his fellow brothers as one by one they were bound and dragged away. The Nazis packed the bound prisoners into the cars of a train, where the stench of human waste and the cries of hungry children tormented Kolbe for the 3-day journey. When they arrived at the camp, an impatient soldier shouted, "Everyone out!" Someone bashed Kolbe in the head for moving too slowly and shoved him along until he ended up in the uniform line, where a soldier tattooed Kolbe Common Prisoner ID, number 16670. It was a good sign. Prisoners earmarked for the gas chamber received no tattoo. The Gestapo immediately sent Kolbe to work and forced him to haul heavy stones for the crematorium wall, breaking down his already frail body. The Gestapo singled him out for extra brutality. A guard known as Bloody Croat pointed to Kolbe. "Double the load on that Polish pig," he shouted. After only a few steps, Kolbe buckled under the impossible weight of the stone. The soldiers beat him brutally and left him for dead. But Kolbe did not die. "Bless him, O Lord, he doesn't understand what he is doing," Kolbe whispered. He kept hearing prisoners' confessions and gave them Holy Communion with smuggled bread. One day, a prisoner escaped, and to retaliate, the Nazis chose 10 prisoners to die in the starvation tank. One of the chosen prisoners cried, "My poor wife, my poor children." Kolbe forced his way to the commander, and he asked if he could take the poor man's place. To everyone's surprise, the Nazis agreed, and the guards led Father Kolbe with the 9 other prisoners to the starvation bunker. The ransomed prisoner said, "I was stunned and could hardly grasp what was going on. I, the condemned, am to live, and someone else willingly and voluntarily offers his life for me." As the scripture says, greater love has no one than this, than someone lay down his life for his friends. John 15:13. In the scope of eternity, what choices will you make today that give life to another? When oppression forces a fearless man to change course, he accepts it as his next assignment.
Amen. Chuck Stecker here. I'm the teaching pastor at Summit Church in Centennial, Colorado. I'm also the executive director of A Chosen Generation. You know, it's August 14th. Our story today is Maximilian Kolbe. I listened to this story. I've read it. I've listened again. And I get struck by a couple of things. You know, how often does a man go, man, I'm your friend, I'm your brother, I'd die for you. Really? And it's easy to say those things because men have never been put in a position to having to die for anyone for the most part. That doesn't take a thing away from our military, our first responders, and others. But I think we use that term maybe a little loosely. The real question is, what are you willing to die for? And I come back to this one with Maximilian Kolbe, that, you know, he could have stayed safely in Rome. Not so safe, but we know the war and you've read the history. But to go back to his native land and there help to rescue, clothe, feed over 3,000 refugees, 2,000 of which were Jews that would have been slaughtered. But then in that moment, frail as he was, beaten down, still having the courage to say, I will take that man's place. But I really was taken by the remark of the man whose place he took. He really said, I was stunned that another person would take my place and die for me. Boy, if that isn't the story of Jesus, if that isn't the gospel message, I don't know what is. And you know, it's not just the fact of dying for someone, but what we saw in this story, or heard in this story, Maximilian Kolbe, was being the hands and feet of Jesus, being the only Jesus that many people are ever going to see by the way we choose to live our lives. Doesn't have to be dying for someone. It can actually be just representing Jesus in the world that we live in, where so many people are hurting. And maybe then we can hear someone say, maybe you won't, but if you do it to hear it, that's a mistake. But to hear someone say, no, that they felt, I can't imagine that a person would actually do that for me. Maybe we can be that kind of man. Maybe we can be that kind of men. As a country, as a nation, in your community. God bless you.